this has already been sort of implied by a lot of what people have said, but and in the chat, but you know, I'm going to come out with a lot of things that are really prescriptive and maybe prohibitive. I think it's just really important that you get advice from lots of different people, right, when you're on the market. And you, in the end, you really have to chart your own path. So don't let any one person or one, you know, set of guidelines somewhere like determine how you apply, because really like you have to take the best from all the different advice you're going to be getting, and you're going to have contradictory opinions as well. So that's super important. And then the other thing is that as I hope that a couple of people here, Cassandra and Elizabeth, could attest, I'm really a nice person. I'm happy to do a lot more nuancing of the prohibitions and things that I'm going to be saying here. But for the purposes of brevity and, you know, also just to drive home some of my frustration at having been on many search committees, both in classical related classics and in lots of other things like computer science and econ over the past 16 years, some of this frustration is coming out. So, okay. Okay, so first of all, some of you, again, will already know quite a lot about SLACs and have experience with them, but I'm just going to say a few things about what is a small liberal arts college. If I can get back to the, okay, so one of the important things to note is that faculty teach a wide variety of courses. That could be true anywhere, but I think for a SLAC, it's really difficult to have an identity like I'm a Hellenist or I'm a Latinist or, you know, I'm a historian. In our department, all of us teach Latin and Greek courses at all levels, and we also teach a variety of different courses in translation, as well as humanities and writing courses, right? So you can't just like decide like I'm never going to do Greek again because I'm done with that. For instance, undergraduates are the focus. This is really the defining feature of the small liberal arts college. Doesn't mean that you won't ever see graduate students, but undergraduate education is really the focus, and it's the core part of any mission statement of a small liberal arts college. And as a result, undergraduates expect and get close relationships with faculty. So if you're not interested in that, small liberal arts colleges are not the place for you. It is easy, and I would even say compulsory, to connect with faculty outside the department, because you are usually in a department that's going to be 2 to 6 people, maybe in a small liberal arts college. So for lots of things, both, you know, just for general college work, but also for, you know, having stimulating intellectual conversations, you will be connecting with faculty outside the department. And this can take a variety of forms. I'll just say from my personal experience, my writing group, when I was a junior faculty member, had a couple of English professors, and I benefited enormously from having that input, you know, and getting to know people. And I have a friend in biology who invites me to go to the talks in her department, and I do, right? It's just like that's kind of liberal arts when it's at its best, is you really get that sense of disciplines talking to each other. And yes, our teaching commitments are also often outside of classics specifically, and we have to be involved in core humanities, writing, and other interdisciplinary classes. I think that can be a little bit intimidating at first, and can seem, you know, like maybe not like what you went to graduate school for. On the other hand, I think that it makes you kind of a more robust scholar and a more intrepid when it comes to trying new things, right? So I never would have thought when I was finishing my PhD that I would be teaching Plato's Republic in a Greek class. Like, I would have laughed in your face if you told me that I had to teach Plato's Republic in a Greek class, or giving a lecture on Rolf Ellison's Invisible Man. But those are things that I do now, and I enjoy them, and I don't think I'm terrible at them either. Okay, so networks of SLACs. A lot of the small liberal arts colleges in the US are actually connected to one another. And this is how that you can sort of talk to scholars who are more knowledgeable about your specialties, and also just have like a connection of a nice network of people who get what you do, right, and understand the ethos of a small liberal arts college. So one of the most important ones that I'll mention here is called ALAC. I think it's Association for Advancing Liberal Arts Colleges. When I was a junior faculty member, I collaborated with colleagues at Oberlin and Scripps to have an Apuleius conference that was funded by ALAC. And so that was a great thing. We got a lot of people, faculty from these colleges together. but we also were able to produce an edited volume from that conference. So the kinds of things that you might imagine as not being available to you in a place with so few classics faculty, you can actually build by connecting with faculty at other SLACs. The teacher-scholar model often prevails. This is something that we could talk about and with lots of different nuances, but I think one thing that is important about a liberal arts professor is that there is always some sort of connection between their research and their teaching, right? That they don't see their teaching and their research as in competition with one another, right? Like, oh, I have to set aside my research and now teach this class, but that somehow like the teaching is making you a better scholar and the scholarship is making you a better teacher. That can be really hard to convey when you're applying for a job, but I think knowing that is a good thing. And small communities, right? So as I said earlier with my biology friend example, you get to know a lot of people outside your field that you never thought you would, have interests in, and people that you develop friendships and lots of wonderful relationships. But there are also lots of unexpected demands on your time and energy, and that can take the form of lots of meetings. There will be lots of meetings, but also, just a lot of time with students, advising students. Sometimes in ways that are borderline therapy, but often just, students want to talk to you about careers. They want to talk to you about whether they should go to graduate school. There'll just be lots of time that you will spend that you may not necessarily be prepared for. I want to mention this just because I think there will be, when you apply to be a visiting assistant professor at a liberal arts college, I think this can be very dangerous path, because sometimes a visiting position can lead to a tenure track one, but I wouldn't say it's the majority of cases, and I wouldn't say that you should expect it ever, right? When you take a visiting position. But the ethos of the liberal arts college, where you're supposed to be spending so much time with students and faculty and your colleagues, your faculty colleagues, it's easy to get sucked into that at the expense of actually finishing that writing that you're supposed to be finishing, and so then you find yourself at a disadvantage when it comes time for the next cycle on the job market. So if you take a visiting assistant position at a small liberal arts college, make sure that you protect your time and you stay competitive, right, when it's time to go on the job market again. Okay, so here are my tips for your cover letter. And again, Robin said a lot of things here that I think will be, my tips are, I think, mostly congruent with what she said. So follow the directions, do not send materials that are not requested. So just for instance, in our last tenure track search in 2019, we did not ask for a research statement. We did not ask for a teaching statement. We did not ask for a diversity statement. We expected that all of those things there would be enough information in your cover letter for those things to, for those areas to be covered. Like, as I wrote in the chat, we had over 200 applications for that position in 2019. So we don't, I personally think have a lot of things to say about diversity statements that aren't good. So don't send that just because you've written it for other jobs, right? If it's not asked for, do not send it, because it will not be read. And you need to integrate it into your cover letter. I won't say it will not be read all the time, but I really think following directions is important. Robin said this, but when presenting your research, keep in mind that your application may be read by people outside the field. There will be people, not just, an archaeologist and you're a philologist, but it's also true that there will be people who are totally outside your field in different departments on the search committee reading this. And so what you really need to do, I think, is in your cover letter, convey the so what of your research. So one thing I've seen maybe too often in cover letters is that when people talk about their dissertation, they kind of locate it in the way that maybe we do when we're with a group of fellow classicists, by saying like, well, this person says this and this person says this. These are all the big names in my subspecialty, and here's how I'm putting my name, my work, how it fits in with so and so and so and so. That's not going to mean anything to someone who's not in your, who's not really like a specialist. So, and yet I see it a lot. So make sure that you can convey like the importance of your dissertation in just a few sentences, obviously, but in a way that doesn't rely on that kind of knowledge. Be realistic about your research trajectory. For SLACs, we're not really interested in your second book, right? I mean, if you're just finishing your dissertation, it's great, if you're thinking about that, and we're not going to discourage you from writing that second book. But I think we're a little bit maybe skeptical that that's really like what you need to be talking about in your cover letter. So what I would advise instead is, just make sure that you're realistic about your trajectory and try to convey it not only as a trajectory that will get you tenure, if it's a tenure track job, but also kind of that really like defines you as a scholar, right? So again, I see a lot of people kind of laundry listing all the things that they hope to be published one day, right? And sometimes that means going back to like a conference paper that you gave 3 years ago because you think that like you really need just to have quantity. But that's not necessarily the right thing to do, right? I think like you want to just convey like, you have a sense of what kind of scholarly identity that you want to have in the world. And another thing is don't assume that just because it's a small liberal arts college, there's a low bar for research, right? Again, sorry, like I've had some bad experiences where people kind of apply as if they're deigning to teach to a liberal arts college, right? We're very proud of what we do, and we really like what we do, and we think that we do. I mean, most of us are doing a lot of research too, so don't assume that it's a step down by any means. What you do want to do is emphasize teaching versatility and breadth, right? And don't just sort of make it like I'm prepared to teach, or I can teach Greek and Latin at all levels and stuff, but use specific examples of your pedagogy to convey that sense that you really love teaching, and not that you just are, you're willing to. Again, this idea of deigning to teach at a liberal arts college is really what you want to avoid. And I would say just for interviews, be ready to discuss a variety of classes in some detail. Having some idea of what a new course in translation that they won't already have on the books, I think is a good thing to start thinking about. Okay, am I out of time? Should I skip this part maybe?
Keep going.
Okay, all right. So now when you get to the interviews, talk and ask about undergraduate mentoring. I mean, this can also go in your cover letter too. I would say that if you're talking about your research in your cover letter, it's always good if you have a not forced opportunity to talk about how you would integrate undergraduate research assistants or undergraduate collaborators into your research. And you can always, if you were stuck for like, what questions do I ask? Just ask SLAC professors to talk about their students. We love our students and we love talking about them, and so it's very easy to like have a great conversation if you just ask that question. All right, again, this is a mistake that I've seen made many times, unfortunately, in interviews. A very common question in an interview is like, what's your dream course? And when people immediately go back to their dissertation research, which they have already talked about in the interview, it's like, oh, we all go to sleep, right? So prepare an answer about your dream course that is not your dissertation research. And people always, I think there's a common fear to worry that you need to have experience of preparation. Like I've never, my graduate program has never given me an opportunity to teach Greek. Like I'm not sure if, I don't know how to present that. It's totally fine. Like we know that graduate programs vary in terms of the teaching opportunities that they offer, and that's okay. But we just want to see that you've put some time into thinking about how you would teach the courses that we've advertised, right? And yeah, just to emphasize that probably the job ad will say something about what those courses are. So you don't necessarily, I'm going to keep saying Greek and Latin at all levels because that's very common for a liberal arts college classics program, but that's not necessarily like always a given, right? Greek and Latin at all levels. But I just put a little bit of thought into like, okay, beginning, intermediate, advanced language classes. What text would I like to use? Like if it's an advanced class, what kind of secondary things would I assign? And what kind of assignments, writing assignments would I develop to make this course successful? And don't worry that you're getting locked in, right? Sometimes maybe for a visiting position where they really have an urgent need for things, they do want to see like really concrete ideas for what the course catalog will look like for the next year. But if it's a tenure track position, we're not really asking you like, what are you going to teach next year? We're asking you a question about the variety of your teaching, just to get a sense of how you think about teaching, right? And we're not necessarily going to actually ever teach any of the courses that you're talking about. And my final point about interviews is definitely research the department, right? Do that, but don't try too hard to sort of slot yourself in. So one mistake I made when I was on the job market was seeing that they had this, one college had this very cool like City of Rome class. And I thought, oh, I would love to teach that class, but without realizing that it was like the property of somebody in that department. So there's no way they would ever let me teach that class. So be careful not to think about sort of often these days, especially what people are looking for is newness, right? And breadth, expanding the department rather than just replacing what they already have. So just keep that in mind when you do your research. Okay, I'm sorry, the way my screen is, I'm not totally clear on the chat here. So if there are any questions, yes. Okay, great. All right, thank you, Cassandra and Elizabeth. And yeah, and Amy about the collaboration. Okay, so I'll stop there. And I'm happy to take Q&A later.